Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto and you're listening to our daily coverage of the 2022 Iditarod here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find all of our episodes over on DogWorks Radio. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching DogWorks Radio. And I am joined today by my co-host, Toni Reitter. She's calling in from Anchorage, Alaska. Toni, how's it going?
Pretty good. We made really good time from Willow. I thought we were going to be stuck in the parking lot forever, but we got out and we got back in time to do the podcast tonight.
Well, thanks for joining us, and I know that you had a very busy day up at the Re-Start. For folks that are new to this, Willow is about an hour and a half on a good day to downtown Anchorage. I drive that drive 2 or 3 times typically a week. I live here in Willow, and I know that drive very well. So let's jump right in to the Re-Start. I know that there was a little bit of hectic activity in the morning. I guess there was a major accident with a military convoy heading north, and a lot of people were biting their nails hoping to get up there. Did they cancel any activities, or was things cut short because of that? Because I know that took up most of the morning, and I don't know if any mushers were stuck in it.
Right. The scuttlebutt that I was hearing was that they thought that there might have been a couple of mushers stuck in that behind the convoy. I'm not sure if that actually came true or if that was just, rumor mill going crazy with the different volunteers that we were standing around. My dad and I actually were almost the wreck with the convoy. Because they were sideswiping a lot of vehicles. It was a really weird experience and very scary. So we were very fortunate that we weren't involved, but it wasn't like 2 or 3 minutes later I saw on Twitter that there had been a major accident involving the convoy. So it was a nail biter just getting to Willow this morning just for that moment. But yeah, no, it was a very calm morning. I think a lot of people were late getting to the parking lot and getting into the community center area to watch the start because of that. But all of the teams made it on time because they all left on time. So it was a concern, but I don't think that it actually affected much. And with COVID, there weren't a lot of extra activities going on like we normally see at the community center.
And it was an absolutely beautiful day up here, bluebird skies, a little warm for dog mushing, but you couldn't ask for a better day weather-wise on that first weekend of March, could you?
No, you couldn't. It was, I think, right about freezing when most of the activity was going on. And then I noticed, at least judging by my phone, that it was about 36 degrees when it was all said and done. So a little warm for the dogs, but hopefully that encouraged the dogs to go a little bit slow, take it easy. Most of them did not seem to want to take it easy as they left the chute. which is always exciting for the fans, but especially since you have the mushers riding on the brakes to no avail as they go charging down the chute.
So you were there on time, and you had a spot there right as the boat ramp enters the lake. In years past, for many years, they started on the lake, and all the dog teams and all of the fans and everybody pretty much scattered all the way across. I guess it's probably about a half a mile or so long, and fans were typically there lined up along the chute. I know that they changed that in the last couple of years, and then they all took off in those 2-minute increments, and it lasted for about 2 hours. They start right around 2 o'clock and then head their way down the trail. And typically as they work their way to the Big Sioux River, there's all sorts of activities going on, very similar to what happens in Anchorage, but a heck of a lot more spread out as the mushers cross, actually hopscotch several lakes as they work their way to the river. And people are barbecuing and snow machines, and, it's a real party atmosphere. But let's talk a little bit about what was going on in Willow itself. I know we were talking off air, and you said it was a little bit less crowded than typical. There were a few COVID procedures in place, but it felt like Iditarod, didn't it?
It did. They played a lot of hobo gym music right before they started announcing the teams, which was kind of bittersweet because it felt like Hobo should have been here. And of course, he passed away earlier this winter. And so it still felt like Iditarod, but you felt a lot of nostalgia. I think for those of us that have been there a long time, when they started playing the Iditarod trail song that he wrote right before the first team came up, there were a lot of people in the crowd actually singing it and singing it loudly, which I haven't experienced in a long time. Normally I'm there with a couple of friends and we're just belting it out with the whole crowd staring at us like we've got 3 heads. But this time it was almost like it was a wave kind of going down singing the song. And then fast forwarding to when all was said and done and over, they played it again. And again, the crowd really just started singing and dancing to that music. So it definitely felt like Iditarod a little bit more than I think the ceremonial start did for me. But yeah, the crowd was very thin. From my recent memory, though, where I was, I couldn't really see down to see how far the crowd went out. I know that they lined the chute, but it wasn't like people deep. It was, everybody was pretty much on the fence, it seemed, every time I looked around. And it was more on one side. A lot of people didn't go to the other side. And I think part of that may have been because everyone was reporting that there was a lot of overflow this morning. And when I got there, it was not anywhere near as what I had been told that it would be. So it turned out to be a perfect day for it. And those that didn't come out for whatever reason, you missed a great show and a great time. But yeah, for the most part, it went really well. The announcers had some trouble with names, and they gave some wonky info on some of the mushers, which I kept correcting them in my little area, but of course I couldn't correct them up there at the microphone. So.
Well, and I'm probably going to butcher the first name that I say. It's Martin Massacotti. Is that correct?
You know what? I'm the worst at names, so I will never give you that much grief over that. But yeah, I think you're close. I don't know. He's French Canadian, and I don't know French Canadian.
So Martin kicked it off right around 2 o'clock. He was musher number 1, and then we worked our way down the list to number 49.
No, that was Sean Williams that was the first one out.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at positions. Right? I
was like, you're looking at the
yes.
You're looking at the check-in.
Yes. I apologize. So Sean Williams was the first one out, and then it ended up with musher number 50, Hugh Neff. And I like to ask, sometimes it's a big time party atmosphere with with the mushers as they head out. In particular, it is on ceremonial day, but even at the restart, sometimes they're wearing flashy clothes or with Hugh Neff and his Cat in the hat. Was there anything spectacular as all the teams headed off to Nome?
Well, speaking of Hugh, he did wear his Cat in the hat to leave for Nome, so that felt very, very familiar. Dee Johnrow, of course, is not running. She is official media. At least that's what her badge said. So I assume that means she's with KTU again. I'm not sure. But she was actually across from us where we were out of the chute. And she has a pink and purple Norwegian-inspired sweater that looked eerily similar to the pattern that Dallas Seavey made famous last year. So that had a lot of people buzzing, not necessarily because of the sweater, but she was of course getting a lot of attention, and I think she kind of stole some of the attention away from the teams going out because everyone was like, "There's Dee Dee," and people were actually going across in between the teams, going through the gate and going and getting pictures with her, which I thought was really funny. And then just staying on the Dallas sweater theme, I did not see the sweater. Everyone was tweeting asking if the sweater was there. I did not see the sweater. I assume it's in the sled bag because I feel like he would want to wear it if it ever gets cold. So, but yeah, no, other than the Cat in the hat and the spotting of Dee, everything was pretty business as usual. Ryan Reddington is in his bright green everything. The entire audience around me, which was mainly people from out of state, this was their first Iditarod, there was just this, ooh, look at the green booties, look at the green jacket, they match. So that was also really fun to listen to. That
is definitely his trademark for sure. And we're going to talk a little bit about Dallas here in just a second, but I want to mention the first 3 checkpoints because it is now a race and it will be for the next 8 or 9 days if all works out well before we have a winner in Nome. The first checkpoint is Yentna. It's about 53 or so miles from Willow. Almost all of that, except for that first few miles, is river running. So it's a typical river type run with those dogs, meaning it's wide open, and depending on the conditions, it could be sloggy, it could be fast, it could be all over the place on the river. And then they head upriver again to Squintna, which is at about 83 miles, and that's an old roadhouse, and they typically stop there on the river, and some of the teams camp there. They used to do a lot of camping and hanging out at Yentna, but not as much as they used to in years past, many years ago. And then they will head up to Finger Lake. So the trail leaves the river and starts winding its way towards the Alaska Range. And that's about 120 or 130 miles or so. And that's where a lot of the big time front runners will take their first longer rest, if you will, camping spot, either before that or right near there. And then, of course, they head up over the Alaska Range, which we will definitely talk about in days coming up. Did I miss anything on those 3 checkpoints there, Toni?
I don't think so. You know, the first night and, day is pretty straightforward. You don't expect a whole lot of anything other than a little bit of leapfrogging, but really the teams are just trying to settle into a good steady pace, get into their rhythm, get into their schedules. It's still a party atmosphere, like you said, from Willow to about the first checkpoint, and even into Squintna. Squintna played a big role last year because that was kind of their last big checkpoint before the finish. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. I'm looking at the GPS right now, and everyone's pretty much, either in, well, most of them are into, Yentna. A lot of the names that you would expect are already on their way to Squintna. So it looks like it's going to be one of those nights that just goes like every other Iditarod that we've seen in the past.
So let's talk a bit about that briefly. I'm sure this will be a topic that we talk about a heck of a lot in our coverage, and that is the way that folks follow, whether it's on Insider or, as we mentioned last night, on the other media outlets, whether it be on Facebook or the news channels or the newspapers or whatever. But a heck of a lot of people follow the tracker, and I know that's part of the Insider package, if I'm not mistaken, and people
Correct.
obsess about that, and they will keep hitting refresh and refresh and refresh, and there's a whole system to that, and there will be people that are screaming at computer screens and sending out messages to other people's Facebook accounts. Hey, is so-and-so okay? His tracker isn't pinging and all of that. Can you give some newcomers some advice about how to best go about following the race, whether it be on the tracker or not, and remain a little bit sane doing so?
I can't speak on how to remain sane during Iditarod because we all know that I'm a little bit of a fanatic when it comes to this race. But for those that are still wading into all of this, don't worry about the first few days of Iditarod. Like I said, there's a lot of leapfrogging. They're just trying to get into their strategy. Until they start taking their 24s, we don't really know who's shaking out where. You can kind of get an idea of who the back of the pack is from the very beginning. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. As far as, if you're watching the GPS tracker, try to have patience. Aliens, or who I blame, like to take and make the trackers glitch. That could mean that sometimes your favorite musher, their flag isn't even showing on the map. They're just gone and they've been abducted. Sometimes their tracker won't ping for hours and they may be resting on the trail. That's most likely what it is, and that's part of their strategy. Even though that doesn't count towards their mandatory rest, sometimes they like to break it up. They don't like to stay in the checkpoints, especially early on in the race. They want to stay out of the hullabaloo that is dog teams coming and going constantly. They want their dogs to be able to rest. So just try to be patient, try to understand that, we are so very fortunate to be able to follow them in almost real time, whereas, not to sound like one of the older generation, but back in my day, we had to wait for the checkpoint reports to come in. We didn't know where anybody was camped out on the trail unless one of the local journalists or one of the local TV stations happened to snow machine out there, get some footage and get it back to whoever could broadcast it, if for the nightly news or whatever. I used to go to the post office and that's where you would get your updates because they had a little update leaderboard, checkpoint board. And so this technology, we've had it for a long enough time that we are now completely obsessed with it. We are completely at its mercy. One other thing I would suggest, that I know there are some people that don't like Facebook, but if you're on Facebook, I would follow along with, and I'm going to say this wrong, so let me make sure I say it right, but it's called Mushing Tech. It's a page that's run by, I think, a couple of more technologically smart people than I am, and they can explain GPS tracker. They don't follow Iditarod as religiously as some of the other races, but they are already posting some updates on how to best read the tracker, what glitches they're noticing on the tracker, and how they wish it would improve. So that would be my biggest thing, is when you are in doubt, go to Mushing Tech on Facebook, and they probably have already noticed what you're noticing, and they have the 411.
And just a couple of quick tips on my end. It is pretty common for a musher to take a wrong turn, especially if they've never done the race before, and you will see them way off trail for a while. But all of these guys are experienced professionals and outdoorsmen, and they will make their way back almost always. I can't recall a time where somebody got themselves off so badly that they ended up having to scratch, and I'm sure you could correct me on that if I'm wrong. And then secondly, if you see a tracker that's flying several hundred miles an hour, almost always that person has scratched even before you will hear about it on a press release or on the internet or whatever. So typically if it's going really, really fast, faster than 10 miles an hour, there's something going on that probably shouldn't be going on. So let's jump over to our story of the evening. And that is a story that came out, I don't know if it came out yesterday or a couple of days previous. It's about Dallas Seavey and his intentions for the future. And I know that you've been pretty close to the Seaveys for most of your life. You're down there really close to them and you've worked with them for a while. So I figure you're as best person as any to ask this. What do you think's going through Dallas's mind from that article that you read?
Well, I'll just say, first of all, I worked for Dallas while I was in college, and all throughout that time working, he always told all of our guests, oh, I have no intentions of being a professional Iditarod dog musher. I'll run Dad's puppy team, but I have no intention of having my own kennel and running Iditarod to win. And then 2 years after I'm done working for him, here he is, and he's in the top 10 and he's going for gold or whatever. So I tend to kind of joke around and say, don't believe anything he says, but I do believe that Dallas is serious about wanting to spend more time with his daughter. I do believe that, as she gets older, he wants to be more invested in her interests and being there to support her. He is a single dad, so he does take that role, I think, very seriously. I haven't talked to him in a while, so, I can't say for certain where his head is other than what the interview has been giving us. But I respect him. I don't think that this is going to be forever. I don't even know that it truly means next year we won't have Dallas in Iditarod or some other races, but I do know that he has always been one of those that, mushing isn't the be-all, end-all. He's grown up in this sport. He's seen the mushers, and I think he even said this in one of the articles that I read, where, he's seen mushers that it just seems like they don't know what else to do with themselves, so they'll just continue running Iditarod even if they really aren't feeling it. But that's just what they're supposed to do, so they're going to keep doing it. And I think that, and this is just totally my opinion, this isn't me speaking for anybody on his behalf or anything like that, but I think he does, want to make sure that he doesn't fall into that rut. He does have other interests, and so I do think that, we might be seeing the end of Dallas hanging out in Iditarod and winning everything that comes his way. But at the same time, I could totally see him back in a year or two when Annie tells him, Dad, you're not cool anymore. Go do your own thing and let me do mine. So it'll be interesting to see. I'll be sad if this is the last time we see Dallas for a while. But at the same time, I'm excited for him, whatever he does next.
I compare a lot to other sports on this show, and a lot of the things that you said you hear in other sports about them not knowing what to do after football or after baseball or hockey or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're a big-time football fan, and I believe your team is the San Francisco 49ers. And I don't know how you feel about Tom Brady, but this statement from Dallas sounded very Tom Brady-ish, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And I'm not a fan of Tom Brady. My dad is. And when the Alaska magazine came out with their Iditarod edition, of course, Dallas is on the front cover. If you haven't seen it, it's on newsstands everywhere, apparently. But he saw it and he immediately said, Dallas is looking a little Tom Brady in this picture. And now I can't unsee it. And I know that that's been a comparison for quite a while. So it doesn't surprise me that, his statements and his announcement gave everyone kind of that Tom Brady feel, because we've been seeing that for a few years in him. He's really running for being the GOAT of at least Iditarod.
And much like Tom Brady, a competitor like that always wants to go out on top. And, of course, Dallas won last year, and Tom Brady, of course, won that year as well with the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And then Tom Brady did not win the Super Bowl this year and retired, even though he was at the top of his game. So it will be interesting to compare where this is going in the off season of mushing. And there is truly an off season and on season as we're working our way through. So Toni, before we get into our Musher of the Day profile, is there anything else you want to mention?
The restart, it was great to have it back to being what we know it is. Last year, I sat at home and I watched them start from Willow. It wasn't the restart. It wasn't the ceremonial start. It was just the start of the Iditarod, and off they went. And it was the first time in forever that I had to sit and watch at home. And it was very depressing. And so being back at Iditarod, being back for the ceremonial start and then the restart today, it felt a little bit more normal. Back in 2020, Iditarod started. We'd been hearing a little thing about some virus over elsewhere, and it could become a big thing. And then halfway through Iditarod, it became a big thing, and the world shut down except for Iditarod. And then all these crazy things happened during that race. And then we've had 2 years of just COVID, everything getting canceled, everything changing. So to come back to the restart, to ceremonial, even with the COVID bubble, even with all the new COVID policies, the vaccination requirements for participants and all of that, it felt more normal than it felt in 2 years. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. I'm very, very thankful. And it's just nice to kind of feel like something feels like it's going back to normal. So I'm still kind of riding high. I'm still on very little sleep and energy, so my brain is all over the place. But I really, really think that even though with the smaller crowd, it definitely feels more like Iditarod this year.
And again, just to quickly compare it to other sports, this is truly our Super Bowl. It's where we go to cheer, and we think about it all year long. And, our teams are the Mushers, and, who we're rooting for, and everybody has their own fans that they root for or mushers that they root for, etc. So it is very comparable to that. And I'm looking forward to a couple of good weeks of talking about Iditarod and, of course, following along. So let's talk a little bit about our musher profile of the evening. We're talking about Kaylin Davis. She is a rookie this year. She's currently, at least the last time I refreshed, in 40th place. She started in 41st place, so she's pretty much exactly where she started in terms of the standings. And she has a pretty interesting story. I did a little bit of lookup on my own, and I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say, and then I'll add my part. What do you know about Kaylin?
Not much more than what her bio gives us. Like I said, I've been out all day, and so I didn't get to do my homework like I should have. But what interested me most, and why one of the reasons why I picked her, is she is running 11 dogs from Wade Mars, and one of them is Wade's dog Mask, who I know has a lot of fans in the Stump Jump Kennel community. This is going to be Mask's final Iditarod from everything that I've read on posts about her team. Mask has run 10 Iditarods and I believe finished all 10 Iditarods. So it's really exciting. She's a super cute dog. She's white and black with really sweet markings. And I know that she's a very special dog to Wade, and it's really, I think, so cool that he allowed such a special dog to have one more Iditarod and take a rookie and a bunch of new dogs down the Iditarod trail as her final hurrah.
And reading through her bio, it looks like that she got hooked on the sport of mushing in elementary school, and I think a lot of bios would say the same thing, and that's why the school programs are so prevalent and relevant when we talk about Iditarod, because so many elementary schools add this to their curriculum. She was visited by Iditarod champion John Baker when she was 7 years old, I believe it says, and she was hooked at that point. She said she was going to run Iditarod one day, and then if memory reminds me, I believe she worked for a while at Trailbreaker Kennel, the home of Susan Butcher, who passed many years ago, but they still keep the kennel going. And then she did her qualifiers with Christine Roloff's and Al Eichen's teams, another couple of Iditarod veterans there. And then finally she broke out on her own, and as you mentioned, is running some of Wade Mars's dogs and, working her way as a rookie. But it looks like she's been involved with mushing for quite a while. And this is a pretty common bring up in the mushing community, isn't it? Most people get their start very similar to the way that Kaylin did, right?
Yeah, I think so. We either see that, they somehow got into Iditarod because they either read Jack London or they watched the movie Iron Will, which I finally watched 2 years ago, and it's actually better than I expected. Or it's through the Iditarod education program that a lot of schools all over the country, and I think in all parts of the world, use, where they come in and they do the Iditarod program or the Iditamath or some sort of curriculum involving the Iditarod during the month of March. And so seeing that come full fruition, we've seen it quite a few times, but it's always fun to see that side and not just hear that, I grew up mushing or that stuff, but seeing how the sport or the race has really encouraged new people into the sport.
Yes, and a topic that I want to bring up this year is about dynasties and legacies. And I know that we have several families in the Iditarod history that are that. When we talk about the Seaveys and the Mackeys and several others, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And that very well could be one of our mushers that we talk about is one of those in those family dynasties or legacies. So I'm looking forward to that. So that comes to my next and final question to you. Who would you like to talk about tomorrow on our Musher profile?
I thought you were going to pick tomorrow. That's not fair. Let me see. Let's just go with, I just went to the withdrawn mushers. Let's not do that. Let's go with a legacy musher. Let's go with Ramey Smith. He's one of my favorite mushers. I just think he's such a great guy. Let's go with him. He never gets really talked about by the other folks in the media about Iditarod legacies, and his goes back just as far as Mitch's does, just as far as Lance's does. And so let's take a look at Ramey tomorrow. And
that will be an interesting one. He's one of the very few mushers on the list that mushes on our trail system here on the east side of the Parks Highway. And I know he and his wife Becca, and if he has a handler or two, they're some of the folks that we will see out on our trails here. And he lives very close to us, just right down the road in Houston, Alaska. So looking forward to talking about him. So Ramey Smith, for folks that are listening tonight, is our musher profile of the evening. Why don't you do your own homework and maybe share a comment or two on social media about what you know about Ramey Smith and his family legacy? Because you are right, Toni, it goes way back to his dad, and his dad is a character in of itself, and I'm sure we will share a story or two about him as well. So Toni, anything else that we missed before we go?
I don't think so. If you didn't get a chance to either watch online or be there in person, you missed out on a great, fantastic day. But we've got now 10 to 12 days worth of race to go, and so I'm looking forward to sharing it with you and chatting with you. This has been fun.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of my co-host Toni Reitter, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio.
So earlier, you learned about First Paw Coffee Company. Now I'm going to tell you about its Trailbreaker Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Trailbreaker Blend is inspired by our love of the Northern Lights, frosty paws, and sled dog trails. How cool is that? The Trailbreaker Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It's a medium dark roast from Central and South America, highlighting flavors of brown sugar, hazelnut, and plum. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.